I am comfortable having uncomfortable conversations, which I think a lot of designers who I speak to are not, about money, about expectations. All day long, you're having tough conversations sometimes. You don't want to, but you have to keep everybody's expectations in line. And I learned to be brave like that from being a lawyer, especially as like a woman of color. And at the time I was 25 going to court. Looking back, I had balls of steel, probably more then than I do now, just because I was kind of clueless back then. And now I'm in my 40s and I've learned some things.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Designing Tomorrow. In today's episode, we have guest Hema Persad, principal designer and founder of Sagrada Studios. Hema has not been in the design industry very long, but she is rising to the top. She was named one of Architectural Digest's New American Voices of 2023, and she has been in multiple publications. In today's episode, we're going to talk about why she immediately opted into PR, the learnings that she took from her career as an attorney and a stylist, and how she's setting up her team for success in order to scale her operations. There is so much in this episode, and I can't wait for you to hear it. So let's dig in. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really, really excited to have you. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
For anyone who's listened to you with, interviews with you, they've heard your incredible story and sort of the path to where you are now. I know I've heard it in a few different ways. So I'm sure that never gets old. It's a great story, and I love the ability to kind of practice telling my story. But I'm just curious if you can give us a recap of how you got to where you are today for some of those listeners that may have not heard that.
The interior design thing was random. So I graduated college and went straight into law school and graduated law school at age 25. And I practiced law for about 7 years before I was really done. And at that time I had two little kids they were both under the age of 3. And I was just really miserable, in my career. So I decided I wanted to try fashion, and I didn't know really what that meant. Growing up and even, where I was, that there were no fashion careers. That's not a thing, or that wasn't a thing. So I decided I would try celebrity styling, and my husband was like, okay, whatever you say. He's super supportive. So we basically sold our house in Florida, moved across the country to California, and I started interning right away. And I was still working remotely for my firm. So I kind of had 2 jobs, but I didn't tell them, obviously. And I just would intern with these big celebrity stylists for free. And eventually, started getting paid, and then left my law firm a few months later. And then after a few years, I kind of also realized, I would say 3 years into celebrity styling, I was like, oh, I don't think this is long-term for me. It's just a kind of a toxic industry. Nobody makes any money. The math was not mathing in that world. You get a lot of free stuff, and at first you get really excited about it, and then you just start to realize that's not paying my mortgage. So I didn't know what to do yet next. I thought about going back into law, and I even interviewed at firms. In the pandemic, I was interviewing for remote jobs all the time. I had just had our 3rd daughter, and I was like, you know what? At least if I go back to being a lawyer, I know what I'm getting myself into, and I'll make a lot of money. And none of that panned out. What did pan out was in early 2021, when my styling clients started, going places again and coming back. One of them, who's an influencer, got a new apartment, and she was like, I just trust you so much, and you have good taste. Will you help me decorate my new place? I hesitated because I'd never done it before. And I was like, why would I do this? But then I was like, you know what? I just finished reading The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer, which is a great book. And the whole point of the book is to just say yes when opportunities come your way. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to just do this experiment, and I'm just going to say yes. And I did it. And we worked with this brand to get some free furniture, and she posted everywhere. And all of a sudden I had clients. It was that fast. And the first few jobs were styling and throw pillows and shelves and, kind of how a lot of designers start, I think. And then the jobs just started getting bigger, and I was still styling at the time. So that whole first year I was doing both, which I find really funny because styling is not a safe backup career, but for some reason I was reluctant to let it go too soon. And then finally I took a look at the numbers. I was like, oh, I think interior design is like something I should really pursue. So that's how Sagrada Studio was born at the end of maybe early 2022. And I told my styling clients I was done styling, and they were like, well, help us with our houses. Like a lot of them were really supportive. So it was great.
Yeah. Do you feel like you maybe held on to styling maybe subconsciously as a referral mechanism? It sounds like that worked out for you.
No. I mean,
No?
maybe
Yeah.
subconsciously, but not consciously. I was so ready to be done. Interior design is not a career that ever crossed my mind. So I think I held on to styling because I was like, because every job I did in interior design, I was like, that was fun. That was the last one.
Yeah.
It'll never happen again. And then they just kept people kept asking. So I just felt like maybe it was my gig mentality because I used to work on, TV sets and I was freelance, right? So I guess I just thought every interior design project was like a project and it was over and I would never have more. So I think that's why.
This may be a silly question given where you're at, but do you feel like interior design is that career for you? I mean, you've had a few now, you're like, you've done it, you've done it other careers successfully. How does it feel like where you are right now?
It feels like this is it for a while. Do I think that this is it forever? No, I don't know. I think I shouldn't say no. I think that what it looks like today is probably not what it will look like in a few years, but I don't know what that is. So right now I'm just dealing with what is in front of me, which is, great projects and great clients. But as far as like a whole other career shift, I'm not the one who's going to say never.
Yeah. I love that. I think it's very clear just, hearing your story, hearing about the things that you've done in the book, right? You're not going to say no to things. So I just didn't know if there was any intentional planning in a future of, I can see where this is going, or are you really still holding on to the mentality that you had when design came to you, which was, I'm just going to say yes to an opportunity?
I try to hold on to it. Sometimes I lose sight of it because probably like yourself, I'm very like goal oriented and I, always want to have a plan and like reach for something. But when I find myself doing that, my anxiety rises and I don't sleep. Like, it's not good. So I always have to talk myself down off that ledge and remind myself, just surrender.
I mean, I think you've clearly not gone through your life settling for anything. So I kind of assume that you think about what's next. And I think you mentioned just now being very goal oriented. Do you have any goal setting or visualization techniques in your daily life or business planning that others might find interesting?
When I tell the story of my career changes, it sounds random, but none of it really is, because before I actually make a move, I do a fair amount of like assessment. So, we recently launched an East Coast office in Tampa, which is where I grew up and where I practice law. And before choosing that location, before deciding to do that, I invested time and a few years now in our systems and building an actual design studio that could be replicated somewhere else, which includes Materio. Like the systems, right? Like I think I've prepared us or tried to prepare us to take on larger projects and to just copy and paste this somewhere else. And that was calculated. I thought about locations because we do have a fair amount of projects on the East Coast, not quite half, but a good amount. And it just made sense to have a physical project manager and people there, for both us and our clients. And I chose Tampa because I was like, you know what? I moved here when I was 13. I have a whole network here. Why would I make it hard and go somewhere like New York where we do have clients, but also we're like in a big pond versus Tampa where I kind of know a lot of people and it's like a smaller pond and it's cheaper to set up, a space and all these things. So I do think about it before I actually do things.
Okay. So very, very calculated strategies that you've got going on. On that note, I think, is there anything, if designers listening, maybe they have their first firm and they're also, or their first location and they're thinking of expanding. What are the kind of top 5 things that you might say, think about these as you're considering that? Because you're obviously doing a good job at that calculated planning.
It hasn't blown up. So we just did this like a month ago.
Okay, congrats.
Thanks. I would say, like honestly, ironically, before all the hurricanes hit, it was something I was thinking about for about a year. And then in July, I went back to visit. Our parents live there and I saw a bunch of friends and they kept asking for referrals. And I was like, why am I giving referrals? Why are we not just doing this? So Number one is, it's a little woo-woo, but there are always clues. And so you should kind of pay attention to where the business is coming to you from. If you don't know where your business is coming from, you should probably figure that out before you decide to set up shop in a specific place. Number two is think about the cost of it. Like, how can you do it really scrappy up front? I'm not out there opening and building out a huge office right now. I invested in a project manager who's come on to be able to handle any clients that we bring on first. So she's now in the process of learning our back end everything. Number three, I would think about like the type of architecture that you want to be working on. In Florida, you're going to get a good variety of like Spanish and, some colonial, and you'll get those new builds too, which is not something that we get in California. It's really rare. Nobody can afford to build here. A lot of people can afford to build in Florida. So to me, it was interesting and intriguing because it's a whole arm of business that we're not really into yet. So I'd say that's three. I'm not sure about 4 and 5. 4 and 5 would be, are you prepared to copy and paste your systems somewhere else? Like if you're not super clear and organized in your current office, it's going to be really hard to set up another one. We wouldn't have been ready a year ago. I think we're much more ready now because everything is very, very like clockwork.
Is there anything you've done specifically around process and preparation for this with your team? I think maybe thinking about repeatable systems. Are there any maybe specific books or mentors or philosophies that have kind of shaped your mindset around duplicating a firm?
I read a lot of business books and I also have a business coach, and it's more about people and understanding people and how they work. Most people don't like unpredictability. I've noticed most people don't like not knowing what their day or their week is going to look like. And so for us, scheduling and storage of information and accessibility of information have become very important. And so everybody on our team knows exactly where to find things, how to communicate, what they need outside of emails. And we've really tried to take the unpredictability out of everyone's day. Obviously, we're interior designers, we work in construction. It's not fully possible to not have unpredictability, but on our end, our projects all have a specific cadence. It's like design phase, then procurement and execution. And within those phases, there are specific steps that we take, and they're very clear and everybody knows what they are.
That's awesome. Do you feel like having the two previous careers, I find that in the design world, when I meet with designers and a lot of the ones that we've even had on the podcast have kind of come from this non-traditional background. Is there anything from your previous careers as an attorney and a stylist that you've taken into running a design firm? I know you mentioned in an interview, this, it really took you 15 years to build this, but what are the actual tactical things that you're the design industry doesn't do this on a daily basis, but this is a given in law, or this is a given in celebrity styling that we just haven't adopted in this industry?
So it's definitely both. From being a lawyer, the contracts and the communication have become, I am comfortable having uncomfortable conversations, which I think a lot of designers who I speak to are not, about money, about expectations, with contractors who are not listening. All day long, you're having tough conversations sometimes. You don't want to, but you have to keep everybody's expectations in line. And I learned to be brave like that from being a lawyer. It's not easy to do. And especially as a woman of color. And at the time I was 25 going to court, looking back, I had balls of steel, probably more then than I do now, just because I was kind of clueless back then. And now I'm in my 40s and I've learned some things, but definitely the bravery and ability to communicate clearly, but still in a way that is not offensive. And listen, I'm not perfect. I'm sure I've pissed some people off on the contractor side, but I see myself as an advocate for my clients. And you learn that advocacy from being a lawyer. I think sometimes it's hard when you're more of a creative person to, stand your ground that way. And designers can lose track of the fact that we're service people, not creatives. And so your service to your client has to come first before any ego that you have about your design. So I think all of that I learned from being both a celebrity stylist and a lawyer, actually, because when you're working with celebrities and in a service capacity, it's like a high touch, high level of making sure that they're not only looking good, but like feeling good and feeling comfortable. And when you work with somebody long term, you kind of become their security blanket in a lot of ways, because I've observed them. They go different places all the time. They're always surrounded by strangers who want something from them. And it's very comforting to them. I noticed when I was a celebrity stylist to have the same people with them, meaning hair, makeup, styling, their manager, whoever, all the time. It's like their little circle of, okay, I know these people are going to have my best interests at heart. I try to convey that to our clients as well.
Today's episode is brought to you by Materio. Materio is an all-in-one project management system made for interior designers and design build firms to operationalize your projects. And whether you heard it in this episode or somewhere else, Materio is going to be the place to streamline communication, manage your selections, and make sure that you can hand off documents and deliverables all to your contractors and your trades. To learn more about Materio, you can visit www.materio.co or check us out on Instagram at materio.co. How do you create that comfort for your design clients? Like, you're trying to do that, but how do you actually make them feel comfortable when you're going through maybe a stressful situation on a project?
It's really hard. It's the hardest part of it. And it's a balance between making sure they feel heard. Listen, sometimes some of the things they come to you with are ridiculous. They really are. Are you in any place to say that? No, because this is their home. This is all their money. It's just a very difficult situation. Anybody who has lived through a renovation, myself included, 3 days in, you're like, why did I do this? So having a high level of empathy for them, and like, they're not in their right mind. It's like a pregnant woman. You're not in your right mind. You're really not. How could you be? So you really have to approach them with a high level of empathy and understand where they're coming from. Like, yes, this person is a wealthy, successful person out in the real world, but right now they're in their worst. We've put them in they've put themselves, but we're in it with them. Really difficult position. So how can they be rational? They're not. They're going to, complain about like paint. I don't know, silly things, right? That seems silly, but to them in that mindset, they're not. So really it's just about listening. I never want to make them feel like their concerns are silly or not valid. And then once you kind of understand what's really going on, which is usually a combination of things like, okay, maybe the contractor did do something wrong and maybe they had a bad day and maybe they're just feeling stressed because they've just spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, all these things. You kind of talk them down off a ledge and you just either validate their concerns or be like, look, I know that this is stressful to you right now. It'll get taken care of. In the grand scheme of things, it's going to all turn out beautiful. Like, you have to keep their eye on the prize at the end. I always divert them to the end. We're going to get there. I promise it's all going to be worth it.
I mean, going back to you having incredible confidence, and kind of jumping in and doing things, like being in a courtroom at 25 and just sort of always pushing forward. Do you feel like that is a mentality you've always had, or is that something that has evolved over time? Because you also mentioned now you're in your 40s, you're a little bit less maybe risky, but I mean, it sounds like you still have it. So tell me about that.
I think I was always that person. I think I was born like that in a sense. I mean, look, we've all been teenagers and we've all been preteens and had body insecurity and all these things. But I think by and large, I've always been a confident speaker, even if inside I feel not sure. I also always read a lot. And so I always feel like because I read and I don't just jump into answering without researching everything, or at least I try not to. I think being a lawyer probably made me better at that. Like, okay, before you give a fact or say something, you need to make sure that what you're about to say is like fact checked,
Yeah.
So I've gotten better at that as I've gotten older, but I think I was sort of born with like this level of authority.
Do you see that in any of your girls?
All of them.
Yeah.
I told my friend last week, we were at breakfast and I was like, my girls are like so great, but sometimes they're just mean. They have this like rod of steel inside of them. And she's like, I wonder why, they all are. And I want to nurture it, but I just don't like when it's directed at me.
Yeah. I always say it's, if you really want a mirror to yourself, just have a kid.
Yeah.
At least that's how I feel.
100%.
I feel like, being a mom and my daughter's actually born on my birthday and she's a little miniature version of me and it is terrifying. Like it is absolutely terrifying.
You're almost like, oh my God, like, was I like this? And you were probably worse, but it's really difficult at times.
Yeah, I get that. Well, let's dive into sort of process and like more about Sagrada Studios and sort of where, I know we talked about how you've now kind of trying to replicate your firm in another location, but talk to me about current team structure.
Yeah. So right now there's me, I'm the principal designer, and I've got a design associate, and together we kind of work on the design phase of our projects. And then I've got a lead project manager. She oversees the execution of all of our projects. And then we've got 2 associate project managers, one in Florida, who I would like to sort of have her be the lead project manager eventually if it works out on the East Coast. And then our associate project manager who also helps with execution. So that's kind of the structure that we've come up with. And at first it was like everybody was working on every project, and we've now started dividing it as we've gotten larger. So only certain people work on certain projects.
What made you want to switch from everybody works on everything to this person sort of leads the project?
It was just getting too chaotic. As a business owner, I need to know immediately who to ask when I need information. And it was getting to the point where I was like, not sure who to ask on my own team, because I could look at GQs or Materio and kind of see who had been doing things, but it wasn't, I would have to dig. Yeah. Versus just knowing in my mind, like, okay, so-and-so is working on the Vermont project, so let me just ask them.
What was the first hire that you made? Like you started this kind of by accident. You jumped into it in 2022. I believe actually probably in your first year of business, you started using Materio. I looked back, I was like,
we were early adopters. Yeah.
Very early adopters. And so what was the first person that you like went to hire when you're like, okay, this is actually something real. I need help.
Someone who could do drawings because I can't.
And you hired them full time, or you were just freelancing them?
For the first year, it was freelance. And I just on a, sort of job by job basis, I would be like, hi, I need drawings for this project. In year 2 is when I brought on somebody who could do it in addition to project management. It was just me and like one person for a while. And they were doing drawings and also helping me with like ordering and tracking and, things like that. It was like kind of like a jack of all trades. And then it became clear that I needed somebody who was really just focused on project execution and dealing with the contractors and dealing with the job sites and stuff like that. So that's when like I carved out sort of like a dedicated project manager, and that person did not have to know how to do drawings either because we had somebody who did. So always though, I think now we're at a point where like most people on our team, unless they're just like a true dedicated project manager, need to know how to do drawings.
As someone who's coming, you didn't go to design school, you don't have the technical background. Obviously, you can hire people for that. But how do you find, like maybe in the early days and maybe even today, how do you communicate your vision of the design to your clients without hand sketching, or I don't know, what methods do you use to communicate that to your clients?
Oh, we do 3D renders. And so that involves fully designing the project before we present it to the clients almost, because we have to do drawings and elevations. We do all the sourcing and speccing, and then our rendering company is in India. So we send everything over to them and there's some back and forth and they put it all together. I've really tried, and then we put it all inside Materio and present it to them through Materio. So I've really tried to, at first I used to do like the concept boards and then, try and put it all on a PDF or whatever, and they still can't visualize. Like one thing I've learned is that most clients, even if they're artists, they have no idea what they're looking at. So first we show the 3D renders and they're really realistic. They're like photorealistic and they're great. Sometimes too good because clients get very hung up on a specific shade of green or things like that. And you're like, no, this is fake. But we have a sample meeting where we bring the samples physically to the client so they can look at the renders and then look at the materials and put it all together in their mind. And even then, sometimes it doesn't click, but we've done everything we can and hopefully they trust us. And, that's kind of how we do it.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that's one thing we hear a lot is, well, we do renderings, but then the clients get really attached to what they see. And so sometimes that can be detrimental if they're very literal and like, oh, well, but this doesn't look exactly like this. But I love that as a way to sell. And it sounds like you've got that down pat. And I know it can be really expensive to get renderings also for projects. Do you charge your clients specifically for rendering services? Or are you like, that's just part of how we design, like that's built into our fee?
Everybody gets the same. It's baked into our design fee.
Okay, so we had talked about how you've been using Materio for about 2 years, early adopters on that, kind of most of Sagrada Studios' life. How did you approach finding a tool, again, being new to the industry somewhat? Like, what were the things you were thinking about when you're like, I need to pick something that's going to work for whatever this is that I'm about to do?
Number one, I wanted to find something that would allow our clients to log in seamlessly and look good. That was my number one priority. It wasn't so much back end, honestly, although we use it quite a bit for that, but it was more so something that would make us look amazing to the clients because I was really sick of sending everything via email. It was just messy. So I needed a portal. And my husband found Materio. He was working with me at the time, getting everything set up. And I don't know how he found Materio. I'll have to ask him, but he said, I found this thing called Materio. Why don't you take a look? And so it had the interface that I liked. And then we kind of dug deeper and it was like, oh, okay, well, we can put our tracking in here for items. And then I liked the aspect of us being able to communicate privately in there as well, about items and about selections and stuff like that. So those things were what attracted me to Materio. It was like our ability to communicate privately with each other and with the client in the same thing about the same item.
You also mentioned GQs and QuickBooks on your intake form. So are there any specifics about those two tools that you find really valuable that other designers might benefit from hearing?
Well, GQs is great. I mean, we tried Monday.com. It wasn't quite right for us. It didn't quite work. GQs is nice because it's just like our to-do list and it's broken out by client. And within that, there's just task assignments with deadlines and we can put pictures on it or leave each other notes or whatever. And then when you're done, you just check it off and everybody can see that it's been done. But it's not meant to be like a permanent record of what we're doing. Permanent things kind of go in the Materio private comments. But the GQs thing is like I look at the week and I can see what everybody's kind of deadlines are and what my deadlines are too. So it helps us with that day to day instead of just like a calendar or something.
Yeah, that makes sense.
QuickBooks, I mean, QuickBooks isn't great, but it's what my accountant uses. So I use it.
Yeah, love-hate relationship maybe.
I'm switching over to Gusto for payroll because I was using QuickBooks payroll and I'm not so thrilled with it, but I hear Gusto's better and it interfaces with QuickBooks, so it's fine.
Another tool that you mentioned, which no one ever says in the list, and I think it is so important to highlight, is 1Password, because not many designers mention using this. And I find that even when we onboard certain team members to Materio, they don't use a password vault or manager. So can we just talk about the benefits of that? Maybe you use it for, I don't know if it's you personally or across your team, but like tell everyone why they should be using a password manager.
My husband is like a super CIA type he's not in the CIA, but he loves anything security related. So he found that. I have to credit him for that too. When he saw my stupid spreadsheet with like passwords and stuff.
Oh no, you had a spreadsheet.
Oh yeah. He was like, what are you doing? Or you know what I did in the very beginning? Like every single login was the same password. He's like, are you insane? Like, what is your problem? I'm like, well, I can't remember 5 million passwords. And like, what do you want me to do? So he set up 1Password and that is what we use for all of our trade logins. And now looking back, I'm like, wow, that was crazy of me to not have some kind of, basically for anybody listening, like 1Password is a vault. Everybody gets a login, you log in and there's for every single website, there's an encrypted password. You just copy it and log in, and like you can save it on your computer if you want. When you log in, you can save the password, but it's just one place that's very secure that keeps all the encrypted passwords. And the amount of things we order, there's no other secure way.
When I think about design teams and exactly like we have all these vendors we're ordering from, we have to log in. They probably just have a spreadsheet.
Oh my God, it was nuts. I was like, one hack and we're done, you know? So
the design hack of today is get a password vault, password manager. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Okay. So we talked about, you were a celebrity stylist, and I'm sure you had some kind of process, although you're working with unique individuals all the time. But was there any part of your stylist process that you carried over specifically to onboarding design clients and sort of starting a project with them?
Definitely the mood board thing. Yeah, we all start with mood boards. And so that is a very sort of high level way to communicate a creative concept. But then I quickly realized, like I said, they don't really get it in the context of their space. But so the mood boards I always did for people. I think one thing that probably my team doesn't understand, but it's just how I work, is that I just need a lot of options. I learned when you're a stylist and you're going to a fitting, you can't just get 3 things and assume that that's going to work. So especially when we're styling photo shoots and stuff like that, I just need all the options. And I don't think a lot of people think that way. I can sift through a lot of options really quickly and make a decision of what we're going to present to the client. But I tell my team all the time, more is more. More is better. Show me everything. I don't care if you think it won't work. Unless you are absolutely positive that I'm going to hate it, I just want to see it, because I can't be everywhere. I tell them to think of me like their worst nightmare client who just wants to see everything and just show it to me. And then we edit. But you cannot edit down if you don't have the options. And I learned that the hard way a lot when I was a stylist. If you show up and the thing isn't there, you're screwed. There's no time, and it's probably not necessary anymore with interior design. I don't know, but it's still how I work.
Are you having your team, maybe let's back up a little bit, in the process of we're picking things, we're looking for, products for this project. Are you having your team go out and find as much as possible? And then you're sort of the next step, they know your aesthetic, and then you kind of say, okay, now let me filter down.
Yeah, that's kind of how we do it. I mean, I also do a lot. I go out there, I just work really fast. And I also, in my mind, have ideas of what I'm looking for anyway. And a lot of times I'll know where to go for that, but it doesn't mean I'm not missing something somewhere else. And it is also an opportunity for them to learn, because feedback is how they learn. So if the other day, I did tell all of them, I'm like, hey guys, this is great, but you're boring me. It's all just boring. And maybe it's harsh, but also I want them to learn. I want them to grow. I want them to push themselves and not just do what is easy.
On that note, how do you handle feedback with your team? I think that's one thing that a lot of designers don't realize. When you start a firm, you're going to have to manage people. You're going to have to be, have those feedback sessions and make sure that those people are successful. How do you handle that at your firm?
Well, I have learned from my business coach that it requires a lot of touch points. So in the beginning, I was like, oh, we'll do a 6-month check-in, and that was not really successful. So now what I do is everybody gets a dedicated 45-minute meeting with me every week. And that my goal in doing that is to cut down on all the interruptions. It's save your questions for our meeting to the extent you can. Obviously, if you need something, I'm here. But I want them to save their big picture things and sort of their project things. And I want them to try and figure things out before they come to me. So everybody gets dedicated 45 minutes weekly. And then we have a weekly, team meeting that everybody's on. And then we have a 90-day review. Everybody gets a 90-day review every 90 days. And they have to do a self-evaluation before we go into that. And then we talk about where they're at, opportunities for improvement, and what their goals are. Because I definitely think it's important for me to know where I can support them and what they're interested in. People always do best working on things that they are interested in. And it kind of helps me keep tabs on oh, well, this person's really excelling in, this area. So maybe that's where we put them more, because guess what? If they're excelling, that means they're more efficient. Everything comes down to the bottom line. So, if you're more efficient, it means we're making more money from this person is more productive in a financial sense, like all the things, right? So I have to keep tabs on that. And then we do an annual review where we talk about like raise and bonus and that kind of thing.
Awesome. Do you, with your team, are you very transparent with them about, hey, this is how Sagrada Studios makes money? Let's all know that so that we can drive towards that.
This is very funny. You're asking me this because I literally did this yesterday. I said, guys, here is the 4 ways we make money. Here is the percentage I contribute. Here's the percentage we get from materials and, our trade discounts, whatever. Here is the percentage that we get from our procurement fee, which really just covers overhead. And here's what you guys are bringing in through your hourlies. And their number was the lowest. And I think we were all like, oh, wow. I said, even on the hourly side, I'm bringing in more than you guys. And granted, my hourly rate is higher. However, there are 4 of you. So what are we doing? And it's not their fault because they enter their hours, but they're not thinking about it. So I hope in doing that, I have at least made them think about how they're working and not just like, okay, enter my hours and move on with my day. Like, how are you spending your time and is it profitable? I think everybody should be accountable for that.
Right. I think there's some design firms who, we run into just like in being a software that services interior designers who are very they shy away from sharing that information with their
everyone
team.
Does. Mm-hmm.
Which I mean, it's like, it's an uncomfortable thing to ever talk about. Well, this is how much money I make, or this is how much the firm makes, because people can be upset. I don't make enough, et cetera.
But numbers, I said percentages, so even that, they were all just kind of like, and then I told them, I said, and the payroll is about 40%, including myself. So I think those numbers were a little bit eye-opening for them. And I talked to them each individually kind of about it afterwards. And I was like, it wasn't to make you guys feel bad. It was just to make you think about it, like right. I want, and they do, they care very much. They want to be productive. Everybody wants to make more money. Everybody wants to be profitable. It's just, if you don't know, how can you address it?
Right. Well, and I think that's what I was getting at is I feel like it's very important. I always come in on the side of like, I think it's very important to let your team know at least the methods in which you can be profitable, because otherwise it's like just giving them a mission, right? If we can't give them a mission for that, just like we give them a mission for a project they're working on, they're not going to think about it. They're not even going to know that it's a thing they need to think about or consider. So I think it's awesome. Okay. We talked about sort of, part of your process for styling and how that came into making your clients now feel comfortable. I love that. Talk to us about the first steps, maybe more, there's lots of different answers for this, so take it however you want, but what are the first steps you literally take when working with a new client? And maybe how do you determine if that client is a good fit for your firm?
I have an intake questionnaire and you'd be surprised. So they, come in via email usually or via the website. And then I send back our intake questionnaire. And that's like a step 1. Some people don't even want to take the time to fill that out. So I'm like, okay, well, if you don't even have time to engage in this process, you're not a good fit, right? I don't follow up. I'm like, here's the questionnaire. If you're interested, fill this out. Then they do. And then, there are questions on there like, well, what's your anticipated budget? Have you ever worked with a designer before? Have you ever done renovations and remodeling before? I ask how they heard about us. I try and get as much information as tell me about the house, the project, all these things. So they write back, and then that helps me determine whether we move on to our 30-minute discovery call. If the budget is too low for what they want or for what we do, that's an email back. And it's always worded something like, would love to be able to do our best work for you, but unfortunately with this budget, given your goals, et cetera, it's just not going to be possible. Let me know if there's wiggle room and I'm happy to continue the conversation. If the budget and the project sounds good, then we move forward to our discovery call that I do with them. And I really am trying to get a sense of like who they are, their expectations as far as the project. I go through our process on that call, how we work. I dig deeper into kind of like what they're looking to accomplish, who lives in the house. And, some red flags are, well, I take long to make decisions, or when there's 2 people on the call and they're not on the same page. I have said before, like, hey, I think maybe the timing's not right. maybe you guys need to do a little bit more work in terms of deciding the direction you want to go in. And then when you're ready, let me know. Then once we sort of determine, okay, this is a great project, we like each other, budget's great, scope is great, then I'll send out a scope of work. But it's interesting because I do so much podcast stuff, or I'm like out there. A lot of people who come to us, they've already like 75% decided they want to work with us. So they're just really trying to figure out if they can afford to at that point, really. Marketing works.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the whole next section of this is like, I'm like, okay, Hema's got the PR, the marketing, all of that down. We're going to have to dig into it. One last question though about clients before we move on, because I think this is something you must have an amazing take on, which is tips for setting boundaries with your clients. You're a mom, you don't want to be texting at the dinner table. How do you communicate that to your clients and hold to it?
It's in our contract, our working hours. Not that they read that very closely, but they do. And they're mostly respectful now. They weren't before I started setting an actual like, hey, we're available weekdays 9 to 6 or whatever it is. And then we just don't respond. I don't entertain the text. They can, of course, I know a lot of designers like, we don't respond by a text. I'm like, that's not realistic to me, it's not realistic in today's day and age. We have to use our phones. We have to text. But I tell my team and the clients, I'll just say like, we don't work after hours. I tell the contractors too, because a lot of contractors will work Saturday and Sunday. And I'm like, hey, unless there is something really serious, like you're not getting anything from us on the weekend. So you need to know that. I tell everyone, I'm just very open about it. Again, I don't have a problem being like, don't call me, They're okay with it. And again, I think that goes back to also like, I put a lot of myself out there publicly. And so in terms of like how I work and who I am, I try to anyway. And so I don't think people are surprised when they get that kind of like matter of fact communication from me.
Okay, going back to putting yourself out there publicly, marketing, PR, all of that, there has to be some of that comes from previous careers. I mean, working with celebrities, I'm sure you experience how beneficial marketing can be and PR. But I'm curious, when did you decide to make the decision to hire a PR team? Like, when were you like, this is legitimate enough, and now I need to figure out how to tell the world that I'm doing this?
Immediately, like basically immediately when I decided to go all in on design, because I was a stylist and work with PR companies all the time, both for celebrities and for clothes. I was like, yeah, it was a no-brainer. Nobody had to tell me you need PR. I had seen the power of it for 7 years. Like I already knew. Oh, if I had known that when I was a lawyer, I'd probably still be a lawyer, by the way. I didn't know how to market. Nobody teaches you when you're 25. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, you got to start thinking about being partners. So tell us about your book of business. And I'm like, what? What book of business? How does one go land a bank? I don't know. So I think that's probably something that my firm needed to address much earlier. I only learned about it from working in fashion, and I had decided immediately. As soon as I had I knew about professional pictures and PR from fashion. And as soon as I had those first few projects, I was on a mission to like find somebody. And so I basically did it right away.
And how do you know that that firm is going to be, or that person is going to be aligned with what you want to communicate? Like, what is it like working with a PR team? For those who don't do it, haven't experienced it, and they're like, wow, Hema just started a few years ago and she's all over the place and she's amazing. I mean, you are amazing. And I'm sure there's a lot of that they have the story to tell. But how do you say, okay, this person's going to help me tell my story and the work that I do the way that I really feel it should be told?
For me, it was about how she represents me publicly. I'm still working with her. It's been over 2 years now, almost 3. And when I spoke to Christina, I was like, oh, you're just like a nice, normal person. Because trust me, I have, again, from 7 years working in fashion, I've met all kinds of characters. And I just knew I didn't want somebody who was going to be ridiculous out there. Like, like they're representing freaking Jane Fonda. Like it's ridiculous. I just wanted a normal, kind person, because guess what? Editors are going to open that person's emails. Brands are going to want to talk to that person because they're just nice and they have good relationships. And so Christina had actually been in the interiors industry for a while, and I knew she had the contacts. That you have to make sure, obviously, that they have the contacts that you want. You got to make sure that they're getting the placements for their other clients that you want for yourself. So that was like step one. Step two is she nice? Can I talk to her? Do I want to have coffee with her? Like, because if I do, that means other people do. So much about what you're paying for with PR is, their contacts and their relationships, but also how they personally are out in the market representing you as if you would represent yourself. And I just wanted like a nice, normal, kind person. No divas.
No divas. We want to make sure that they have the contacts. I'm guessing you're just looking for their, where they've placed people, or you ask them about that, and that they're kind.
And you also want to make sure that they have a strategy specifically for you. Like if you talk to a PR person and they just they're not really getting your personal story, because everybody's story is different. If they're just trying to do generic stuff without telling who you are, it has to be like a full 360 strategy. It's not like, okay, get my work in this magazine. It's like, well, what are all the points that we're going to hit in this strategy? It's not just the work. It's you as a business owner. It's, your home. Like, is that an opportunity? Things like that. It has to be 360, not just one thing.
I mean, working with PR, knowing you're going to be putting yourself out there, you also mentioned just like you do try to put yourself out there and be on podcasts and be in magazines. Do you ever like second guess that public nature of your work? Like, are you ever like, why did I put myself out there? Now I have to, people know my face, people know who I am.
No, I don't think so, because it's not like I put out like anything too personal. That's also part of the PR strategy, by the way. It's like everybody who you see out there has a thing that people come to their Instagram or whatever for, and I figured out pretty early, like for me, it's that career transition story as well as design. Those are the two pillars that I kind of put out there the most. And then occasionally there's like parenting, but not too much. If you look, I don't say much more than that. My business coach and I were we were having drinks on Saturday night, and she said something. She reminded me, because I was like, oh my God, I just keep posting the same stuff over and over. I can't wait till we are able to photograph these projects and have new things. And she's like, marketing is not saying 100 different things. I'm butchering this. Marketing is saying the same thing 100 times, or it's a quote from somewhere, And she always reminds me, like, you're sick of yourself, but like nobody else is paying that much attention. So just keep putting it out there.
I mean, yes, I don't know the exact quote, but it makes total sense, because you're basically refining your approach to communicating your aesthetic and your story over and over again, and you're kind of tweaking that positioning and making sure that it's told. But I think that's very common when you are a creative person and you're putting a design out there that you're like, I wish we could just maybe do a different style house or get these new photos out there. But it's true. Everybody, they're coming to you because they love it.
Yeah, just say it. I've literally looked at, I'm not a Instagram content creator. There are home DIY, whatever content creators. And I've watched the same person make their bed twice a week from a different angle and get like so much engagement. And I'm like, this is what the people want. Just give the people what they want over and over.
It's interesting. I've definitely been a part of a few different UGC kind of marketing, content creation courses over the years. And there's this one influencer who literally, like, in one of the trainings that she did, was like, you just like drink your water bottle here, and then tomorrow you just drink your water bottle the other direction, and then you put words on top of it, and people, you get all these views. And it is a very interesting world that we live in.
It is.
I think that maybe people aren't even thinking so much when they're looking at these types of content, right? It's kind of our, I don't have a TV in my house, so I don't like watch TV, but I do definitely scroll on Instagram a little too much sometimes. So I think maybe it's just kind of that like, the day has been long. And then you're like, you don't even pay attention to the fact that you watched someone make their bed in a different angle yesterday.
No, I don't think people get sick of looking at beautiful things or being inspired. I don't think they get sick of that. Even if they've seen it before, it's like, even I do it. I'm like, oh, there's like some projects by some designers who I really admire and I could look at them all the time because they just love them, or we all follow some motivational speaker out there and they really do say the same thing every single day or version of it. Are we tired of it? No, we're not. We're here for it.
Yeah, it's true. You mentioned having a business coach. When did you decide to bring on a business coach?
When I realized that I didn't really know how to manage people or grow further than what I was capable of in terms of, I knew how to, it's been about, I'd say a year and a half. So I would say a year and a half in, I was like, oh, I need more people. I have no people management skills whatsoever. When have not no, but like not in a formal sense and not in a structured sense. And I realized that if you're going to really build a business, you have to learn how to do this properly. The bluntness, I am the first one to recognize it doesn't always go over well. And I really need to learn how to be heard, not just how to get my message out there. Who cares? I can say whatever I want to say, but if the people that I'm speaking to are not hearing me, then it doesn't matter. So I felt like she's really helped me hone in on people management and also on really just deciding where I want to focus my energy in this business, because you start having some success in interior design, then you're like, oh my God, I need to do e-commerce. I need to do, all these things. And I had those goals. And she's like, do you really want to do this? And we dug really deep. And I was like, no, I don't want to do this, So she helped me narrow when I felt like, okay, design, I got that. Now what's next? And she kind of helped me figure out what was next.
So you recently collaborated with Architectural Digest and Ruggable to design your own rug. Is that right? So
yeah.
How did that opportunity arise?
They asked. So in 2023, I was named they do this annual list every year. It's the New American Voices. And so they named me one of the New American Voices in 2023. And it's a huge honor. There are a lot of lists out there. I think that one is I couldn't even believe it. I was like, are you guys sure? Like, why? But there's 8 people in the world every year who get named to that list. It is whoever AD thinks is like the next cool thing. I don't think there's a better list out there for an up and coming designer. I was so beyond honored and felt so undeserving. And Christina, my PR, was like, can you not? Like, what is wrong with you? Because I felt so new. It was like some imposter syndrome. So anyway, they named us that. And then they invited some of us from like the current list and the past list to do this collaboration with Ruggable. So really it was all orchestrated through AD.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Congratulations on all of that.
Thank you.
It's really epic. Okay. I know we are getting to kind of the end. We've been together for about an hour. So tell me, is there a particular project that you are, maybe something you did recently that you're really proud of or excited for everyone to see soon?
Yeah, we've got 2 that we're wrapping up and shooting in the next couple of weeks. They're residential and they're really like not out there, but they're different for us. They're more, every project that we do has gotten larger and larger. And these 2 in particular are just more. And so I'm excited to share them. I don't really know when we'll be able to, because obviously we're going to try and get some placements for them. And then what we're working on now, I'm actually flying to Vermont tomorrow for a vacation home that we're working on. And then we've got our first international project that we're working on in the Bahamas.
Ooh. Mm-hmm. Hopefully you get to go there a few times.
I do have to go. There's no roof on it just yet.
I have to go.
Yeah, I do have to go.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So those won't see the light of day till next year or something. But sure. That's where we're at. I think there's a big focus for me right now on just getting bigger projects.
Awesome. Well, one of our goals kind of with this podcast is to look kind of into the future and make intentional plans or shape ideas about what tomorrow can look like. Clearly, you've kind of carved your own path here, but if you had the ability to do anything or maybe improve or shape the future of design, what would it be?
I mean, it's a pretty robust industry. So I guess the future of design to me looks like more use of technology to streamline our processes, and especially the delivery process. Like, we're still dealing with big, heavy, large things and a lot of people. The third party situation is what throws a wrench in our plans most days. Like me and my team, we can control what we do, but we can't control what all the other third parties are doing, whether it's delivery or contractors or trades or vendors. And so I wish that there was a way to make all of this smooth. I don't know what it is.
We need to wave a magic wand and it's all solved. Okay, I love it. Well, I think it's something to think about. I think it makes a lot of sense that it is an industry where it's heavily people oriented and relied on that. I don't know how that it's hard to imagine a world in which we change that, right? But I do think that obviously at Materio, we're on a mission to kind of make processes more streamlined. So I love that. Hema, thank you so much for joining me today. I really, really appreciated this conversation and all of your insights.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Designing Tomorrow. This podcast is brought to you by Materio. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, like, and leave us a comment below about what you thought.